Hey there! Today I want to talk about Space Marine 2, both the good and the bad, as well as try to answer the question, is this game worth buying? Now, you might imagine I'm probably going to say yes without hesitation, as I've streamed the game a few times and pumped a fair amount of time into it already. But I think the answer might actually be a little bit more complicated than all that, so let's not waste any time and dive right in. Real quick, an overview. Space Marine 2 is a third-person hack-and-slash shooter that takes place in the grand world of Warhammer 40k, which, good god, what a world, by the way. This game marks my official first introduction into Warhammer lore, but more on that in a minute. If you've never played a Warhammer game, all you need to know right now is Imperium of Man, good. Enemies of Man, bad. The future is intense and dark, and there is only war. You can play solo or with two friends if your primary interest is PvE shoot-'em-up co-op, or you can play with up to 5 friends if you want to roll deep into PvP, which is 6v6. The game's available on every platform shown here and currently retails for $59.99 for the standard edition. Alright, now that you know the basic gist, why don't we first cover the good, everything I love about this game. After that, we'll go ahead and cover the bad, and then give my final verdict. Okay, first up, the good, starting with the lore and the world. As mentioned earlier, Space Marine 2 is in fact my first ever step into the overall world of Warhammer, and Jesus God almighty, what an introduction. I gotta give credit where credit is due. If there's any game that really has made me want to open up 10 new tabs in Chrome and start deep diving the lore, it's Space Marine 2. I genuinely had no idea that Warframe as a whole was so wonderfully, brutally insane. Between this game and Helldivers, I've learned something new about myself in the past year. Any game where we're knee-deep in extreme war-heavy fanaticism, apparently I'm all in. I've gone from knowing absolute jack about Warhammer to still knowing jack, but dabbling in the backstory and happily shouting things like, "For the Emperor," when ripping Tyranids apart with my bare hands. I love the gritty world, the eternal hardcore badassery of the Ultramarines, and please believe me when I tell you that even if you've never drank even a single drop of the Warhammer Kool-Aid, you're still at extreme risk of calling everyone in the Fireteam chat brother over the mic if you fire up this game. Anyway, gritty, extreme future war vibes aside, and focusing on the actual gameplay itself, good lord, the combat. It's not insanely deep or complex. It's actually rather kind of simple once you get the basics down, but it's brutal, violent, and incredibly satisfying. The first time I found myself surrounded on all sides by enemies, shooting them to shreds or grabbing them and smashing them to bits into the ground, I immediately felt the rush, and most folks I've talked to who have played the game know exactly what I'm talking about. 1v1ing a high-level enemy when surrounded by dozens of other foes, managing to hold your ground and pulling off dodges and parries before ripping them apart with a chainsword and going after more. It is indescribably awesome. Admittedly, I haven't played a butt ton of games with a perfect parry system. I was never much of an OG Dark Souls guy, but in Space Marine 2, I really find myself wanting to perfect parry the ever-loving hell out of everything that moves. What really goes hand in hand with the combat is the game's overall difficulty. In endgame operations, which is what I've primarily been running, more on that later, there are 4 difficulty levels: minimal, average, substantial, and ruthless. Until you've truly hit the end of endgame and have a max level build, here's a more accurate renaming of these difficulty levels: Cakewalk, Baseline, Oh Damn, and Holy shit. I'm sure that as more time goes on and players get a better, more complete understanding of the meta, Ruthless difficulty will probably lose a bit of its edge and become the new norm for endgame players. But until then, god freaking damn, this is not only just challenging, but fun challenging. On high level difficulty, there are tons of enemies and very little room for error between you and your team. You're gonna be knee deep in dudes almost the entire time, and completing a ruthless operation feels extra good because in all honesty, your team probably came close to failing a few times, and IMO, that just makes victory all the sweeter. While there may be some concerns here regarding long-term replayability, which I'll get to, at the very least, high-level difficulty combat is fun AF, and if you're asking me, the main selling point of the game, especially if you're playing with friends. Yes, even though this game can be enjoyed by the solo folk out there, this game is truly awesome if you're rolling with a squad of homies. Not that it's unfun to play with AI or randoms in matchmaking, both of which are options to you, but being knee-deep in blood-soaked combat with your bros, covering each other from extremist flanks, standing shoulder to shoulder to fight off the horde together, a goddamn plus in my book. book. I'm gonna go ahead and give you a sneak peek at the end of today's video and just flat out say right now, if you ever enjoyed playing Gears of War co-op back in the day with buddies, or just have a small group of friends and you're looking for a new PvE action game or a shooter, strong recommendation that you at the very least look into getting Space Marine 2. The final bullet point under the good I want to talk about, leveling up your character, both in terms of building your skill tree and unlocking new armor and weapons as you advance. Now, just to be completely clear, unlocking new armor does precisely dick for you and your build overall. It's purely 100% cosmetic, but man, it's oddly addicting. I think it's just the fact that it's Warhammer and this is the aesthetic of the universe. But unlocking bigger and wilder armor to the point where you just look like an insane warmonger Chungus is badass and satisfying, and I love just looking at my Marine and finding myself itching to unlock whatever the next big gaudy thing is. Likewise, for the skill tree on each class, you'll probably find that with your first endgame character, you're going to be eager as hell to grind out max level of 25 so you can perfectly fine-tune your build the way you want it to be, and then put those new perks to use in combat. And with all of that in mind, we've officially talked all about the good, so now let's talk about the bad. Things about the game where I'm either a little concerned or maybe it just falls a bit short in my opinion. First up on that list, it's a bit short. The campaign will only take you about maybe 6 or 7 hours to get through, give or take, and then endgame PvE consists of only 6 individual missions called operations. I will give a tip of the hat. I really liked that operations were tied directly to the main campaign. They basically let you experience various side missions that were going on during the main story of the campaign, so it all kind of comes together. But again, these missions only take 30-ish or so minutes to beat, and then that's it. And while you can play both these operations and the campaign as much as you like, it does eventually start to feel a tad repetitive. Thankfully, the pure awesomeness of combat combined with my desire to max level a few characters did make it easier than you'd think to grind. At high difficulty, you're still going to get those heart-pounding, intense vibes the whole way through, even if you've done that same operation a bunch of times before. But that being said, man, I am really jonesing for some new operations and some new modes, let me tell you. Thankfully, we are getting new content, as we can see from ye old Space Marine 2 content roadmap, but that on its own also comes with both good and bad. Season 2 already thankfully looks to be great, a new enemy type, really hoping for orcs by the way, as I've been reading up on their lore and they sound just ridiculous. Also, we got new PvE missions, a new weapon, although it seems to be a secondary weapon, boo, and best of all, a new PvE difficulty, lethal. My buddy and fellow tuber you may have heard of, T-Roo Vanguard, has a theory that lethal mode may feature friendly fire, as the game apparently has dialogue that triggers when you shoot a teammate, even though all levels of difficulty currently feature 0 friendly fire at all. Again, just a theory, but if that does turn out to be a thing, that would be incredibly challenging, and hey, I'm all here for it. But on the downside, Horde mode, a game type which not only do I desperately want to play, but IMO should be a core game type staple for a game like this, isn't coming until Season 4, aka the later half of 2025. Granted, we'll have new missions and stuff to grind between now and then, but man, I cannot stress enough how much Horde mode feels like it should be a baseline core game type for a game like Space Marine 2. I want to see how long I can hold out with my homies against endless waves of combatants, and then compare our best times to the rest of the communities, make it a competition with leaderboards, all that stuff. Again, the fact that Horde mode isn't in the game at launch with so few missions on the table, and that we have to wait over a year for it to get here, is absolutely criminal. I also can't help but notice that in the roadmap, there's no current plan to announce a new playable endgame class, meaning that for 4 full seasons, we're just stuck with the current 6. And don't get me wrong, they're all fun, but again, I feel like this game is just begging for more. That's really one of the only things that hurts me about Space Marine 2. With a world this beautiful, lore this enticing, challenge this satisfying, and combat this brutal, I just want more. And with the current landscape of just campaign and 6 endgame operations, I don't know. I mean, I'll be happy to take breaks and return to Space Marine 2 when it's time to spill more blood in the name of our glorious Emperor, but again, just feels like there could and should be more, especially for the game's current price tag. Moving right along on our list of bad, why don't we talk about PvP real quick? To be fair, I'm not sure if I should 100% put this under a quote bad umbrella, More like mid. As many of you know, I'm a big PvP lover, and sadly the PvP in Space Marine 2 is extremely forgettable. I've had a couple fun games for sure, but it doesn't have the same energy, the same magic. I'm sorta extra bummed that there isn't any real build crafting in PvP at the moment. Your endgame PvE classes do not carry over into PvP. And yeah, I get that some of the PvE perks would likely be insanely OP and broken in PvP, but to have no perk building system at all kind of feels like a wasted opportunity. I'm not really too miffed about PvP though. The more I play this game, the more I come to the very clear understanding that Space Marine 2 was obviously meant to be a PvE game at its core. The PvP is kind of an afterthought to me, and I think that's okay. I think the main point under the bad umbrella that's going to turn people away from potentially buying though is that Space Marine 2, again, is IMO best played with friends. The hilarity and the fun times and the challenge with your homies in PvE genuinely cannot be overstated. And while I've still enjoyed myself while playing solo, it's just not really the same. Yeah, you can play with AI or other randos, but like I said earlier, at higher difficulty, playing with randoms becomes noticeably more challenging, I'll say. And good lord, the AI. I don't know what's going on with the AI in Space Marine 2, but playing on high difficulty with any AI on your team at all is a hard do not recommend from me. AI will deliberately not execute finishable enemies a lot of the time and just walk away from them. And while I'm sure that was intentional to make sure that players are the ones performing executions to regen their armor, Jesus Christ, half the time I'm halfway across the damn map and it's like, bro, just finish the goddamn Terminid. Jesus. I've had other moments where a random boss encounter happens mid-mission and the AI proves to be less than helpful. I'm sure the goal there was to make sure AI couldn't just hard carry you through content and make it a breeze, but good lord. One final note in the bad category I have, which the more I think about it might technically count as nitpicking, armory data. In operations, you have a chance at finding this, armory data. Finding these is incredibly important because they give you armory data tokens which you need to upgrade your arsenal. Every time you run an operation though, different items appear randomly across a few predetermined locations in that operation. Running through a mission and not finding the armory data is frustrating because it potentially means that you're finishing a operation and getting only XP and nothing else, which is kinda okay unless you're already on a max level character. And at first I thought, well, I guess I just missed the armory data that run. I gotta look harder next time. But now I'm 99.99999% sure that sometimes when you run an operation, RNG can potentially dictate so that there's just straight up no armory data available for you to find anywhere on that run. And if you don't get an RNG boss fight, which also grants you an armory token upon completion, then congratulations, you've just spent 40-ish minutes running an operation to receive 0 armory data, which, and I can't overstress this enough, is a horrible goddamn feeling. I get that item RNG should be a thing, but to a degree, man. If you're running a high-level difficulty operation, there should be a 0% chance at completing that entire operation and earning 0 armory data. That should straight up not happen at all. I will die on this hill. Okay, with all of that in mind, where does this leave us? Is Space Marine 2 worth buying or not? I don't like reviewing games by giving them a number rank out of 10 because what appeals to me may be different to you, and everybody has different tastes. But in short, I think if you're looking for a PvE game with strong hack and slash combat, especially if you have a group of friends and are looking for something new to play, this is a strong recommend from me. The price tag might be a bit much to some, but if a night of fun co-op with the homies is your routine jam, I am near confident that for you, this will be worth it. On the other hand, if you're looking for a game with either top shelf competitive PvP or a very, very long, deep customizable campaign, Space Marine 2 probably isn't for you, and that's okay. At the end of the day though, I love this game. And even though it's not going to become the main thing I play, I'm happy to add it into my rotation of fun games to grind with friends, and will eagerly return from whatever I'm playing to fire it up when additional content arrives. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section, and if you enjoyed today's video, feel free to subscribe. Thanks very much for watching. Peace.